Welcome to the Turin True Center for Baha'i History. The center was established by the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States in January of 2024. Its purpose is to foster the study of Baha'i history, Baha'i sacred texts, Baha'i philosophical and theological concepts, and world religions from a Baha'i and comparative perspective. I am Dr. Robert Stockman, director of the center. Joining me today is Necati Alkan. He has been fascinated with Baha'i studies, especially history, since his youth. Studying Islamic studies and history at the university opened new vistas for him, and by learning Arabic, Persian, and in particular Ottoman Turkish, beside his native Turkish and almost native German and English, he was then well equipped for delving into Baha'i studies. He's been publishing on the topic since 2001, various topics. He considers his main and related research, some of which was his master's thesis, which was about the relationship of the Baha'i faith to Islamic reform and movements in the 19th century. He then wrote a doctoral dissertation, completed, I'm losing, there it is, 2004, about the Babis and the Baha'is in Ottoman Empire in Turkey, 1844 to the 1920s. And the latter was then published in 2008 and revised, published under the title Descent and Heterodoxy in the Late Ottoman Empire, Reformers, Babis, and Baha'is, ISIS Press. He regards his postgraduate research up to his current research as crucial research, because the genesis of the Babi and Baha'i religions in the Ottoman context had otherwise not been researched. So this is a very important development to have all this material available. He's a specialist in late Ottoman history and also the author of a recent book on non-Sunni Muslims in the late Ottoman Empire. So he focuses in that particular case, particularly on the Alawis. He's also published widely articles in edited collections and in peer-reviewed journals. He also, finally, had the honor of serving in the research department at the Baha'i World Center for several different times, and was also a visiting senior fellow at the chair for Baha'i Studies at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. So Necati has done many different things and is a real expert on Ottoman history and the relationship of the Babi and Baha'i faiths to the Ottoman Empire and Ottoman figures. And so we will then be hearing from him today about those subjects. Thank you so much for joining us, Necati. We're really grateful to have you here today, and we're looking forward, to hear from you about the Baha'is and the Babis in the Ottoman Empire. So I will now turn off my camera and turn everything over to you.
Thank you very much, Rob. Pleasure to be here. We know each other for many years now, and as you know, also from the Wilmette Institute and from courses and also from presentations. So I'm glad to be here at the Turin True Center for Baha'i History today and in following presentations. So coming to my topic today, it's simply called the Babis and Baha'is in the Ottoman Empire. I will try to show to you why it's so important to have this subject. As you know, we all know Baha'u'llah was from Iran, or Persia as it was called in the 19th century. But so the Babi religion originated in Iran in the mid-1840s. And we have like 6 years of the Babi faith in Iran, 6 years, or say 9 years, if you will, until Baha'u'llah was exiled to the Ottoman Empire in 1852-53. And then Baha'u'llah's ministry actually in Iran was very short. So what we have is 40 years of his life and ministry in the Ottoman Empire. And then we have Abdul Baha, of course, who was being exiled with him. And also Abdul Baha, he was around 8-9 years old when he arrived to Baghdad with his father and his family and other believers. So Abdul Baha was all in all 60, 70 years almost in the Ottoman Empire. And so we cannot just dismiss this fact that Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha, were active in the Ottoman Empire. And as much as Persian sources, especially Baha'i sources, but also non-Baha'i sources, are important for the study of the Babi and Baha'i religions, we have an amount of Ottoman state papers about the Babis and Baha'is in the Ottoman Empire. And so basically, we have the Ottoman Archives in Istanbul, which is the biggest archive in the world because of the amount of documents. And we also have published Ottoman sources from starting from the late 19th century up to the early 20th century about the Babis and Baha'is in books, journals, newspapers, memoirs, and sort of things. And also for Baha'i histories, of course, also we have the Baha'i writings, especially by Baha'u'llah, say the Suratul Haykal, Suratul Muluk, Lohi Ra'is, the Surah Ra'is, Lohi Fuad, all addressed to Sultan Abdul Aziz and Ali and Fuad Pasha. We have some tablets and letters by Abdul Baha. Of course, God passes by. We have the promised days come. We have the World Order of Baha'u'llah, where Shoghi Effendi refers to the Ottoman Empire. And we have also letters in the collection Baha'i Administration. Let me see if I can move my PowerPoints. Yes. So coming to the periods in Babi and Baha'i history. So we have the Bab before his declaration even. He spent time in Ottoman Iraq in 1841 for 7 months in Karbala, attending lectures by Sayyid Kazim Rashti, who was the second leader of the Sheikhi movement. And we have also Baha'u'llah before his official revelation at the Siyah Chal. He was exiled for a brief period to Karbala in Ottoman Iraq in 1851. And so as you can see from the very early, even before the official Baha'i history, we have the Bab and Baha'u'llah spending time in Ottoman domains. And then we have the case of the second letter of the living, Mullah Ali Bastami in Ottoman Iraq in 1844-45, and then Baha'u'llah's periods of exile in Baghdad from 1853 to 1863, and then his exile for about 4 months in Istanbul in 1863. After that, his banishment to Edirne from late 1863 to August 1868 for 4.5 years. And then Baha'u'llah's exile in Akka from 1868 until his passing in 1892. And of course, Abdul Baha, as I said, from very early on, from his arrival in Baghdad until the end of World War I, where the Ottoman Empire was dissolved, if you will, and the British took over in 1918. But most of the documents we have in the Ottoman Archives is regarding the exile of Baha'u'llah in the Ottoman Empire, and also many documents about Abdul Baha, especially after the ascension of Baha'u'llah. So what we're dealing with is that the Babi and Baha'i religions emerged and developed during the Ottoman reform period, which is called the Tanzimat, or reordering, from 1839 to 1876. And then we have the post-Tanzimat or post-reform period from 1876 to 1908 until the Young Turk Revolution. and the Young Turk period between 1908 and 1918. We have several sultans during that time who are more or less mentioned in the Baha'i writings. We have Sultan Abdul Majid, who announced the first and the second reform decrees in 1839 and 1856. We have, of course, Sultan Abdulaziz, who exiled Baha'u'llah 3 times within Ottoman domains, who ruled between 1861 to 1876, who was the 32nd Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. And then we have a very brief period of Sultan Murad V in 1876 after the deposition of Sultan Abdulaziz. And then we have Sultan Abdul Hamid II with his long reign of 33 years, who was the 34th Sultan and who announced the 3rd Tanzimat or reform decree and of the first Ottoman constitution and parliament. And the ones who come after him, the last 2 sultans of the Ottoman Empire are Sultan Reshad, known as Mehmed V, and then we have Mehmed VI. The 6th, also known as Sultan Bahdeddin, who was the last sultan and is being seen in modern Turkish history as a traitor and puppet of European powers. So I will briefly refer to comments of Shoghi Effendi in God Passes By and Promised Days Come about these sultans. The only positive comment of Shoghi Effendi is about Sultan Abdul Majid, where he says in God Passes By, so struck indeed had the Sultan Abdul Majid been by the favorable reports received about Baha'u'llah from successive governors of Baghdad. This is the personal testimony given by the governor's deputy to Baha'u'llah himself, that he, meaning the Sultan, consistently refused to countenance the requests of the Persian government, either to deliver him, Baha'u'llah, to their representative, or to order his expulsion from Turkish territory. And then in Promised Days Come, Shoghi Effendi says, Imperial Turkey, that had under Abdul Majid been admitted into the European concert and had emerged victorious from the Crimean War. After that, you don't have any positive word about the Ottoman rulers by Shoghi Effendi. And then in Promised Days Come, Shoghi Effendi continues, under his successor, Sultan Abdul Aziz, upon a period of swift decline, culminating soon after Abdul Baha's passing, in the doom which the judgment of God had pronounced against it. So all of this which I'm reading from Shoghi Effendi is, of course, from providential history, from like say sacred Baha'i history about the Ottomans. And then he says, risings in Crete and the Balkans marked the reign of this, the 32nd Sultan of his dynasty, a despot whose mind was vacuous, whose recklessness was extreme, whose extravagance knew no bounds. The Eastern question, meaning the fate of the Ottoman Empire, entered upon an acute phase. His gross misrule gave rise to movements. I put into brackets some italic words which may clarify some things, which were to exercise far-reaching effects upon his realm, while his continual and enormous borrowings, leading to a state of semi-bankruptcy, introduced the principle of foreign control over the finances of his empire. A conspiracy leading to a palace revolution finally deposed him. A fatwa or religious decree of the Mufti denounced his incapacity and extravagance. 4 days later, he was assassinated. Here we see Abdul Aziz, after he was deposed and arrested and humiliated, actually, because he was not anymore in his pompous, sultanic dress, but
we're still looking at the map, by the way. You haven't moved them forward, so I think you need to go down to the pictures farther down.
No, I'm sorry. Something. Okay, is it better now?
Yeah. There you go.
Okay. So sorry, I thought it was working. Anyway, so did you see the other images or not?
No.
So the sultans, I mentioned the sultans, and then Abdul Aziz, after his deposition, was arrested and assassinated 4 days later. And this is his last photograph, being dressed as a normal subject and humiliated, actually. After him was Murad V, about whom Shoghi Effendi says, Abdulaziz was succeeded by his nephew Murad V, whose mind had been reduced to a nullity by intemperance and by a long seclusion in the cage, which means he was under house arrest his whole life and constant surveillance, constantly surveyed by palace guards. So after that, he was declared Sultan, but declared to be imbecile. He, after a reign of 3 months, was deposed. And then we come to Sultan Abdul Hamid. Can you now see the forward of the is it okay now?
Yeah, we're looking at slide 12 with the picture of Abdul Hamid.
So do you see me moving it forward and backward?
Well, right now we're just seeing slide 12. We haven't seen it. We're not seeing it change, if that's what you're asking. But
so you see Abdul Hamid now.
Yes, and text to the there we go. You just changed it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'll stay with this one.
Good.
So Shoghi Effendi says that Murad V was succeeded by the subtle, the resourceful, and the suspicious, the tyrannical Abdul Hamid II, who proved to be the most mean, cunning, untrustworthy, and cruel intriguer of the long dynasty of Osman, meaning the Ottomans. And then Shoghi Effendi is quoting from some book. No one knew it was written of him from day to day who was the person on whose advice the Sultan overruled his ostensible ministers, whether a favorite lady of his harem, or a eunuch, or some fanatical dervish, or an astrologer or a spy. The war, the Ottoman-Russian War of 1877-78, accelerated the process of the empire's dismemberment. No less than 11 million people were emancipated from Turkish yoke. The Russian troops occupied Adrianople. Serbia, Montenegro, and Romania proclaimed their independence. And universal contempt and hatred of an infamous sovereign, shared alike by his Christian and Muslim subjects, fully culminating in a revolution swift and sweeping. The Committee of Young Turks secured from the Sheikh al-Islam the condemnation of the Sultan. Deserted and friendless, execrated by his subjects and despised by his fellow rulers, he was forced to abdicate and was made a prisoner of state, thus ending a reign more disastrous in its immediate losses of territory and in the certainty of others to follow, and more conspicuous for the deterioration of the condition of his subjects than that of any of his 23 degenerate predecessors since the death of Suleiman the Magnificent. Shoghi Effendi, continuing to the next two sultans, saying, the end of so shameful a reign, meaning that of Abdul Hamid II, was but the beginning of a new era, which, however, auspiciously hailed at first, meaning the Young Turk Revolution, was destined to witness the collapse of the Ottoman ramshackle and worm-eaten state. Muhammad V, a brother of Abdul Hamid II, an absolute non-entity, failed to improve the status of his subjects. The follies of his government ultimately sealed the doom of the empire. The war of 1914 to 18 provided the occasion. Military reverses brought to a head the forces that were sapping its foundations. 9/10 of the large Turkish armies had melted away. A fourth of the whole population had been perished from war, disease, famine, and massacre. We know that the final battle was in Ottoman Palestine when the British had a victory over the Ottomans. So, and then the next and last ruler, the last Sultan, Muhammad VI, the last of the 25 successive degenerate sultans, these are the words of Shoghi Effendi, had meanwhile succeeded his wretched brother. The edifice of the empire was now quaking and tottering to its fall. Mustafa Kemal, meaning the later Ataturk, dealt it the final blows. Turkey, that had already shrunk to a small Asiatic state, became a republic. The Sultan was deposed, the Ottoman Sultanate was ended, a rulership that had remained unbroken for 6.5 centuries was extinguished. An empire which had stretched from the center of Hungary to the Persian Gulf and the Sudan and from the Caspian Sea to Iran and Africa had now dwindled to a small Asiatic republic. Constantinople itself, which after the fall of Byzantium had been honored as the splendid metropolis of the Roman Empire and had been made the capital of the Ottoman government, was abandoned by its conquerors and stripped of its pomp and glory, a mute reminder of the base tyranny that had for so long stained its throne. Such, in their bare outline, were the awful evidences of that retributive justice which so tragically afflicted Abdulaziz, his successors, and his throne and his dynasty. And then Shogh Effendi, continuing with about the last caliph, the same forces operating in a collateral field have effected a still more remarkable and a more radical revolution, culminating in the collapse and fall of the Muslim Caliphate, the most powerful institution of the whole Islamic world. This event of portentous significance has, moreover, been followed by a formal and definite separation of what was left of the Sunni faith in Turkey from the state, and by the complete secularization of the republic that has risen on the ruins of the Ottoman theocratic empire. The ex-caliph, shorn of his royal pomp, stripped off the symbols of his vicarship, and deserted by friend and foe alike, was forced to flee from Constantinople, the proud seat of a dual sovereignty, to the land of the infidels, resigning himself to that same life of exile to which a number of his fellow sovereigns, meaning the last sultan and his family, had been and were still condemned. So this is in outline what Shogh Effendi basically describes in, as I said, in terms of providential sacred history about the end of the Ottoman Empire. So what do we have at the Ottoman Archives? Coming to the sources about the Babi and Baha'i religions, the earliest documents we find about the trial of the second letter of the living, Mullah Ali Bastami, from the early Babi period, from 1845 to 46. And I gave a separate talk about that at the Clearwater Baha'i lecture series. Then we have the exile decrees of Baha'u'llah to Istanbul, Edirne, Akka, and also of his half-brother to Cyprus. We have residency issues in those places over several decades. We have documents about the issue of travel allowances for Baha'u'llah and his retinue, issue of allowances or pensions, financial issues and debts of Baha'u'llah and Edirne. We have documents about the conflict between Mirza Hussein Ali, meaning Baha'u'llah, and Mirza Yahya, and his instigator, the Antichrist Muhammad Isfahani. We have issues of Babis who were left in Baghdad after Baha'u'llah had left to Istanbul. We have, for example, documents about the fate of the Baha'i Ali Sayyah, who was exiled to Cyprus with others to Cyprus, and then also a document about Mishkin Kalam. We have a legal report of the murder of 3 Azalis in Akka, and there's also a separate talk by me about that one, which is online. And then we have various other documents at the Ottoman Archives, for example, about illegal Babi school in Akka, in the Khane Abu Ahmed, which is this caravanserai in the center of Akka. So illegal Babi school means just children's classes for the Baha'i children there. We have reports about the Babis in America from the early 20th century, and then about the second group of Western pilgrims in Haifa and Akka from 1899. We have documents about the so-called mischief of Abbas Effendi in Haifa and Akka, saying that he illegally purchased lands from the Arabs and selling it to the Jews. And we have also documents about the proposed exile of Abdul Baha to Fizan, which is in present Libya, from around 1901, and also about Abdul Baha's visits to the United States, and a letter of thanks of US Baha'is to young Turks in Istanbul with about approximately 800 signatures. So, as I said, the earliest Babi-Baha'i related official records and at the Ottoman Archives are about the trial of Mullah Ali Bastami, the second believer in the Bab, and we have one document about Tahire as well, the only female disciple of the Bab. And then most of the documents are about Baha'u'llah's exiles in Baghdad, Istanbul, Edirne, and Akka, including the exile decrees, the fermans, and then about Abdul Baha mostly after 1892, and one from 1872, which I will summarize here as well. And so just briefly, there's another talk about this, but just briefly, again, for those who maybe don't know much about the topic. So Mullah Ali Bastami is the second letter of the living. We know that the Bab dispatched the letters of the living to different regions in Iran, and then especially Mullah Ali Bastami to Ottoman Iraq, to the holy cities of Karbala and Najaf, which are holy for the Shi'is. And so after arriving in Najaf and Karbala, Bastami approached Shi and Sheikh clerics there and showed them portions of the Bab's Qayyum al-Asma. And instantly the Shi clerics rejected Bastami and the Bab's claims to be the Mahdi. But Bastami was successful and had convinced hundreds of people, especially among the Sheikhis. So he was regarded as dangerous by the Ottoman authorities and by the Shi clerics. So he was detained, and a report was sent to the governor of Baghdad, the Ottoman governor Necip Pasha, and finally Bastami was taken to jail in Baghdad. So, and we have a set of correspondence by Necip Pasha with Istanbul about this issue of Mullah Ali Bastami causing unrest, say, in Najaf and Karbala. So as much as Iran was disturbed or bothered by this, also the Ottomans were not very pleased with this. And so basically what Necip Pasha says, he says that he deals with the issue of Mahdi's messenger, Bastami, and as I said, there was correspondence with Istanbul. And at the end, Necip Pasha established a court trial for Mullah Ali Bastami in January 1845. And the specialty of this court was that it was perhaps the first time that Sunni and Shia scholars, who are usually arch enemies, agreed on an issue about a common enemy. And the Mufti of Baghdad then, Sheikh Mahmud Alusi, he presided over the court. So we have a total of 20 Sunni and 10 Shia clerics who gathered, and they issued a fatwa, a religious decree about the Bab and Bastami. And at the end, the Sunni clerics demanded the death of Bastami and that of the Bab, but the Shias opposed it and said that the Ottomans need to send back Bastami back to Iran. Ultimately, Necip Pasha didn't listen to any of the clerics, but Bastami was ultimately exiled to Istanbul, and who died there under hardships around late 1846. So this is the first set of early Ottoman documents about the Babi religion. Here you can see on the left some of the communications by Necip Pasha about Bastami, and on the right side the fatwa declaring the Bab and Mullah Ali Bastami as heretics. And then we have one document, as I said, about Tahire. In this document, in this letter, again by Necip Pasha, the governor of Baghdad, he repeats the mischief of Mullah Ali Bastami, who had come to Karbala with the false claim of being the deputy of the Mahdi, who had distributed some sheets, the reading of which was unlawful, Necip Pasha says. And Bastami said, this is the real Quran, and thus he incited mischief in the region of Karbala. In the same vein, Necip Pasha says, this time a woman named Qurratul Ain appeared and is exerting efforts in distributing mischief in the same region, and attracting and inviting ignorant people to be her followers, and so on. So Tahirih was detained for a while, but then released by order of Sultan Abdul Majid and went back to Iran. And when we come to the exile of Baha'u'llah in Baghdad, before he was exiled to Baghdad, the Ottoman embassy in Tehran issued 2 letters of recommendation, actually, which are published in one of the Baha'i World volumes. And these 2 letters of recommendation were issued by the Ottoman envoy, who you see here, Ahmed Vefik Pasha, and delivered to Baha'u'llah, who is mentioned as an Iranian notable worthy of esteem and respect. So prior to his departure for Baghdad, and Ahmed Vefik Pasha is known as a renowned Ottoman statesman, diplomat, and writer. And he has very positive words about about Baha'u'llah in these 2 letters. And I will just give you snippets. I'm sorry if I seem to be like jumping from topic to topic, but these are just snippets, and we don't have much time to go into details. So the next document which you see is the exile decree for Istanbul, from Baghdad to Istanbul, in which basically it says that the residents of the Babis, who some years ago had attempted to kill the Shah, meaning Nasreddin Shah, in places near to Iran, posed a threat to the Shah, and hence the Ottoman government should interfere in this matter in order to maintain a peaceful relationship with the Iranian government. Yet the expulsion of refugees in the empire by force, they say, ran counter to Ottoman customs, the rule of justice, and international regulations. Nevertheless, the Ottomans say in this document, it was dangerous that persons like Baha'u'llah and his followers should dwell in Baghdad, where he could stir up mischief among different groups of peoples and tribes. And we have on the left left corner in the bottom, you have a note of Sultan Abdul Aziz saying that it is necessary that the matter of sending the aforementioned Mirza Hussein Ali and some of his companions to Istanbul, so as to make them reside at places such as Bursa and Edirne, and this should be recommended to His Excellency the above mentioned Marshal, meaning the Governor Namik Pasha. So what we can also glean from Ottoman documents is actually, for example, we know from Baha'u'llah's own statements and from Abdul Baha that they say that Baha'u'llah was exiled from Istanbul to Edirne suddenly in the middle of winter. And if you look at this document, it says already in 1863 that after Baha'u'llah is to be sent to Istanbul, he can be sent to Bursa, which is another city in West Turkey, or Edirne. It's already mentioned here, but it was probably not communicated to Baha'u'llah. And then we have letters by the Ottoman governor of Baghdad, Namik Pasha, for example, to the prime minister from April 1863. At that time, Baha'u'llah was in the garden of Rezwan. So Namik Pasha is basically asking the governors of the provinces through which Baha'u'llah and the other exiles would be passing to extend to them the utmost consideration and to make them reach Istanbul in good condition. Baha'u'llah should be given travel allowance of 25,000 piasters that he may not suffer sore poverty. So the Ottomans being sending Baha'u'llah, as he says, with a grief or grave injustice without any reason, they still provided him some travel allowances and also pensions in the places where he was exiled. So here you see a list of the male exiles in the communication of the governor of Baghdad. Some are named by name, some are not. For example, we have Mirza Musa mentioned, the brother of Baha'u'llah, or his other faithful brother, Mirza Riza Quli, and then it says about his sons Mirza Abbas and the others. Mirza Mehdi is mentioned, and many others in this list. Another interesting document is, as you know, there is a tablet of Baha'u'llah, probably the first one after he left Baghdad, that was revealed on Turkish soil, the Lawh-e Samsun or Lawh-e Hodaj, where Baha'u'llah says, so approaching the end of his journey from Baghdad to Samsun at the Black Sea, Baha'u'llah revealed in this tablet. This is a provisional translation. It says, these are verses from which were disclosed in the pavilion or tent of eternity, and the Howdah of holiness at the moment when the greatest name arrived at the precinct of majesty in the land of Samsun at the shore of a mighty ocean. And then we have this document at the Ottoman Archives saying, after arriving, meaning in Samsun, Hussein Ali Effendi rested in his tent for some days in the town of Samsun. And after that, it says, he boarded the imperial ship and departed for Istanbul from Samsun. So you can see here the link between, an Ottoman document and tablet of Baha'u'llah, which mentions the same things. I will not go, as I said, into details about Baha'u'llah's, sojourn in Istanbul or Edirne, but just briefly jump from document to document. And we know more or less what happened in Istanbul. Here we have a document, for example, contrary to what Baha'u'llah says, that he and his family were exiled to Edirne suddenly in the middle of winter. This document says, upon his, meaning Baha'u'llah's, written request to His Majesty, which is enclosed in the file and presented to the Sultan for permission to reside in Edirne, to be sent together with his family to Edirne. So there are some contradictions, as you can see, to Baha'u'llah's own words. And the second page of this document says that he, Baha'u'llah, is also said to have sent a list with the number of his family members and animals to accompany him. The list is sealed with Hussein Ali, which you can see at the end of the document. It's a seal that he used for official matters. And then in Edirne, we have also a friendly governor, actually, like the one in Baghdad, like Namek Pasha. We have Khurshid Pasha in Istanbul, who also was very fond of Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha during those, I think, 3 years he was governor in Edirne. And he, like Namek Pasha, also says to Istanbul, basically, that he states that Baha'u'llah did not constitute any danger to the empire, but he could not convince the authorities in Istanbul. And there was an episode where Baha'is were arrested in Istanbul and cross-examined. And then this cross-examination in Istanbul, this court trial in Istanbul, was between March and April, 31st March and 7th April 1868. Among them was Mishkin Kalam and Mirza al-Sayyah, who both were exiled to Cyprus later on. And this is the episode which you probably remember from Adib Tahirzade's Revelation of Baha'u'llah. It's when Baha'u'llah needs money for his family in Edirne, and then he decides to sell 3 beautiful horses. So he instructs 3 or 4 Baha'is to take these horses and to go to Istanbul and to sell them and get the money. But these Baha'is were arrested upon entering the gates to Istanbul and were cross-examined with others who were already in Istanbul, and also with a follower of Mirza Yahya. And then what happened is that in the saddlebags of these horses, so we learned that these Baha'is also had taken writings of Baha'u'llah and of Mirza Yahya with them to Istanbul, or the Ottomans confiscated the writings of Mirza Yahya in Istanbul by his followers. So we have many original writings of Baha'u'llah at the Ottoman Archives. The one you see here is in the handwriting of Baha'u'llah himself. And as I could count, I think both the writings of Baha'u'llah and Mirza Yahya are about 1,000 pages. So we have here specimen of the writings at the Ottoman Archives. So then in this box actually where the writings are kept at the Ottoman Archives, we have also many communications by Ottoman authorities. In one of those documents, it says that the Ottoman Commission concluded from the confiscated voluminous writings that Subhi Azal had copied the Quran and that he claimed that his writings were revealed to him by God. Based on this, Yahya claimed prophethood. And then they say Sheikh Mirza Hussein Ali received revelations in Persian and Arabic and claimed some sort of prophethood that also comprised the station of the Mahdi. Of course, they were wrong. Baha'u'llah never claimed to be the Mahdi, but somehow they got the impression. So these are other writings, just some examples of Baha'u'llah at the Ottoman Archives. Here you have on the left side, for example, a copy of the Rash-e-Ama, which is probably first and only writing of Baha'u'llah revealed in Iran. And then you have on the right side actually a copy of the Words of Wisdom, which you know from this collection of tablets of Baha'u'llah, which were supposedly revealed in Akka. But here we can see that the Words of Wisdom were already available before the exile to Akka, actually. So they must have been revealed either in Baghdad, Istanbul, or Edirne. Then we come to the exile decree for Akka. Just briefly, again, the edict touches on several points. So after all this interrogation of several Baha'is in Istanbul, and also Baha'u'llah was, interrogated by the governor of Edirne, and after all this interrogations, the Ottomans they decided that the Babis should be punished. So this exile decree for Akka says actually that both Mirza Yahya and Baha'u'llah claimed prophethood or Mahdiship and divine revelation. The perceived purpose was to deceive ignorant Muslims, multiply in number, and wage an armed insurrection against the Sultan or the Ottoman government. They had this impression somehow. It's no surprise because, as you know, Mirza Yahya, the half-brother of Baha'u'llah, and his accomplice or his instigator, Muhammad Isfahani, they continuously send false reports to the Ottoman government in Istanbul that Baha'u'llah was actually planning an insurrection against the Ottomans. About 3.5 years after the arrival in Akka, Abdul Baha sent a letter to the then Ottoman Prime Minister, Mahmud Nedim Pasha, describing the events and the reasons for the continuous banishments within the Ottoman Empire. This is interesting also to read from Abdul Baha himself, in contrast to other Baha'i sources. So basically what Abdul Baha says in this letter is that, so an important issue which Abdul Baha mentions, and I haven't seen in any Baha'i sources, he says that it relates actually to the expulsion of the Babs from Baghdad. He says that it was due to a tax issue. He says that the Iranian Babis in Baghdad had to pay, based on Ottoman rule and applicable to all foreigners, a tax called the Sanfiya in Arabic, a tax for artisans or tradesmen, and were ordered by Baha'u'llah to do so. Yet the Iranian consul, Mirza Buzurg Khan, Iranian consul in Baghdad, deemed it improper and instigated his government against the Babis. This is what Abdul Baha actually writes. After the rejection of this order by the Iranian consul, some Iranian citizens approached Baha'u'llah, who argued that the Iranians too should be included under this order. by the Ottomans. This angered the consul, and consequently he initiated the harassment of the Babis, which in turn forced them to apply for the Ottoman citizenship. Then Mirza Hussein Khan, the Iran ambassador in Istanbul, strived and succeeded in removing the Babis from Iraq. And regarding the exile from Edirne, Abdul Baha writes in the same letter that despite the friendly attitude of the people in Edirne, one day all of a sudden soldiers surrounded the house of Baha'u'llah. And after inquiring about the reason, they were told that it was decreed by the Sublime Porte, meaning the Ottoman government, that they be sent to Gallipoli. Consternation seized the Baha'i community after soldiers arrested Baha'u'llah and his followers, and they were forced to leave Edirne. This is also recounted by Baha'u'llah, this episode. Without understanding the reason, as Abdul Baha continues in this letter, all the family and followers, counting 70 persons, were exiled to Akka, where they were incarcerated in the military barracks. Then, after 1 month, he was surprised to read in an Ottoman newspaper that the Ottoman marshal of the police force received for this act the Lion and Sun Medal of the first class by the Iranian government. Abdul Baha further wrote in his letter that the edict commanding the exile to Akka stated that he and Baha'u'llah were interrogated in Istanbul, and upon being found guilty, they were exiled. This, of course, was contrary to the truth, because Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha were never present at the Sublime Porte for an interrogation. So the Ottomans somehow put this forward. Abdul Baha then continues in this letter also saying that 3.5 years had passed since the writing of this letter, that they had been in extreme wretchedness and abasement as prisoners in Akka, in spite of leaving Iran and arriving in the Ottoman Empire in utmost glory, and having been guests of the Ottoman state. He asked how a person who was in full glory and arrived at the Ottoman capital by an imperial order could end up as one abandoned and walled up within the ruinous prison of Akka with a daily allowance of 4 piasters. Their situation was so bad that he could not put it in words. Abdul Baha concludes their situation thus with an Islamic hadith. He says, "The 7 heavens and the 7 earths weep over the mighty people when they are brought low and the rich made poor." Abdul Baha hoped that the Ottoman Prime Minister would issue an edict of compassion to end the plight of the Baha'is in Akka. Actually, as we know, after about 2.5 years, Baha'u'llah was released from the prison, from the citadel in Akka, because the Ottoman military needed that citadel for military purposes. So, making a long story short, I just showed these snippets from the Ottoman archives, and if I may conclude, based on the reading of these documents and the general context, which I also use in my book, which Rob mentioned. So in my academic historical analysis, there are 3 factors based on the Ottoman perspective, which may have been decisive for the survival of the Baha'i religion in the Ottoman Empire. The first was that Baha'u'llah instructed his followers not to propagate his religion in the Ottoman Empire. His and Abdul Baha's approach of using discretion and wisdom in order not to endanger the safety of their followers, because the public image of the Baha'i community and its beliefs was that of a heretical Shi'i sect that deviated from Orthodox Sunni Islam. The second factor was the overall tolerant attitude of the Sublime Porte, the Ottoman government, in particular of influential Ottoman officials such as governors, towards the Baha'is, and in contrast with the Iranian government and powerful Shi'i clerics. It is important to note that the fact that the Ottomans provided a safe refuge for the Baha'i leadership, despite of all the banishments, despite all of the hardships, I think we can say that this is a factor which historically seen, provided a safe refuge for the Baha'i leadership. And then the third and last factor, in my opinion, the locations or places of exile were crucial for the development of the Baha'i religion. Mirza Yahya was on the remote island of Cyprus with his family, and there is no evidence that he expanded the Babi community or spread his teachings. Conversely, even though Baha'u'llah was forcibly settled in Akka, that he viewed as a terrible place, with the impact of the Tanzimat reforms and the European infiltration, it became a center of economic activity, and the initial unfavorable conditions improved later. Baha'u'llah was already given Ottoman citizenship in Baghdad, as I said, and also the other members of his family, including Abdul Baha, and so protected from being handed over to Iran. Baha'u'llah received an allowance from the Ottomans so as to survive. He was gradually able to meet his followers, even in Akka, where he was not supposed to mingle with other people. He could move inside and outside Akka. He lived as an exiled religious leader in mansions of former governors that he rented or bought. He had time to compose his voluminous writings and send followers to propagate his religion outside the Middle East. That resulted in a worldwide religious community, especially by the efforts of Abdul Baha later, after he was released by the Young Turks. So this is my presentation for today, and thank you in Turkish and English.
Thank you so much, Necati. That's fantastic, and especially your summary at the end really is really very helpful, I think.
Thank you.
We had some really interesting comments, I think. Steve asks, did you find all these materials in the archives, and were they largely unknown before?
Good question. Actually, before I started all this work, there are other early Baha'is who discovered these documents. Actually, I will tell you an episode when I was at the first international conference of the Baha'i chair of Baha'i Studies in Jerusalem. You were there, Rob, were you, in 2000?
Yep.
Yes. So I had a private meeting with Mr. Nakhjavani at that time, who was at that time member of the House, and he actually told me that Shoghi Effendi, he grew up under Shoghi Effendi's, in his household. And so Mr. Nakhjavani told me actually that Shoghi Effendi once went to Istanbul and went to the Ottoman Archives and searched for some documents upon which an early Baha'i, who will I mention, Sami Doktoroglu, he apparently saw Shoghi Effendi, but he didn't approach him. So somehow, but I know that this early Baha'i and Shoghi Effendi had also communicated earlier, because of this Sami Doktoroglu was the one who found these holy places in Istanbul, in Edirne, and so on. So rediscovered these places. So this is one of this, and Mr. Sami Oğlu was one who actually had copies of documents, and he sent it to Mr. Balyuzi, Hassan Balyuzi, who wrote about Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha'is, So in his volume, King of Glory, Mr. Balyuzi mentions some of the Ottoman documents with a summary provided by this Turkish Baha'i, which also then Mujan Momen also used in his volume about the Babi and Baha'i religions. So these were known, and there was also another Baha'i couple in Turkey, also one like early Baha'is who were also specialists in Ottoman and Iranian history, and who also sent copies of these documents to Haifa. And then I came along, and with the encouragement of several Baha'is, for example, Nicola Tawfiq, who was an excellent scholar in Germany, she and Mr. Ekbal, Kamran Ekbal, they had always encouraged me while I was studying to go to Istanbul and find those documents, which luckily I found. And then with the help of another Turkish Baha'i friend, just very recently, the last few years, we found many, many other documents as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you found quite a few.
Yes.
of these documents,
I
definitely.
can write another volume.
Of course, we've got another talk in 2 weeks, so I hope you've got some more
Yes.
at that point as well. The particularly the documents about Ali Bastami
Yes.
and his trial, those must be things that you found, I would think, because we didn't know about that information until, what, 30 years ago, 20 or 30 years ago.
Yes. Yes. You know, there's an article by Mujan Momin about the trial of Mullah Ali Bastami, and as I said, this fatwa, this religious decree, was already found by these early Turkish Baha'is and sent to Haifa, and Hassan Balyuzib, I think, had a copy. So Mujan did translate this with the help of someone from Arabic to English and published this article, but like details of communications of the governor of Baghdad and so on, they were not discovered so far.
Fantastic. One person asks about the list of animals, whether they were pets who were also sent into exile.
Oh, okay, actually, I should have. These are mules, actually.
I was wondering about that. Yeah.
Yes. yeah. These are mules, like donkeys, whatever.
Right. I didn't think the Holy Family had a poodle or anything like that.
Probably not. And not a cat, like you have one.
That's right. Yeah, I don't think they had cats either, actually. So that's very interesting. One person asked about the 800 signatures. That was the number of signatures on a petition?
Yes. This is a letter. I don't know if we can find it instantly, but probably not. But yes, this is when Abdul Baha arrived in New York. He, you say unboarded the ship. He went off the ship, and he was in New York first. So and then he had contact with the Persian consul and the Ottoman ambassador, Yusuf Ziya Pasha.
Right.
So Yusuf Ziya Pasha is described also in these volumes about Ali Quli Khan by Marzieh Gale. He is mentioned several times by Julia Thompson. He is described as a very religious man, and first being suspicious of Abdul Baha, and then being an admirer of Abdul Baha. So actually, he gave a reception for Abdul Baha at the Ottoman embassy, and as a sign of a gratitude, actually, Baha'is all over the United States, even cities are mentioned. They somehow collected these signatures and probably sent it to a central person, and then they drafted a letter to the Young Turks in Istanbul, thanking them for releasing Abbas Effendi and being kind to him and so on. And they say, whatever we can do to support your government, we will do. So and actually this list is very interesting. I think I sent it to you once. There you can actually see which early American Baha'is were around. So it's
right.
Yes.
It's an important sort of list, actually. And Steve Collins was wondering whether we could get that list again. I don't remember you sending it to me. Well, maybe vaguely I remember you sending me something like that. Yeah, that was a while ago. I have no idea where it would be now, unfortunately.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can send it. Sure.
Yeah, Steve Collins would like to have it. But it is a useful list to see who was active in the community, of course.
Yes.
Mike asked, did Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha speak Turkish or reveal tablets in the Turkish language? We're going to hear more about that, of course, in October.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. I mean, the question is, a Baha'i, did Baha'u'llah know something, yes, he says he knew everything, but, I mean, like historically, he didn't reveal anything in Turkish. So I don't know of anything. But I know there are episodes of meeting like Azeri, like, Turkish Iranian Baha'is, where he spoke with them Turkish. So he knew Turkish.
Oh, that's Baha'u'llah.
Yes, that's Baha'u'llah, also mentioned in one of the volumes by Adib Taherzadeh. So we know he sometimes chatted in Turkish with those Azeri Baha'is, yes. And Abdul Baha, as you will see in October, had also revealed tablets in Turkish, prayers, mostly in Azeri Turkish. And also there are also many letters at the Baha'i World Center, like official letters to minor and higher Ottoman officials.
And Azeri Turkish is the Turkish of Azerbaijan and northwestern.
Yes, it's just a dialect, just a dialect of
And it's probably also spoken in modern Azerbaijan, I suppose.
Yes. They would understand that.
Yeah. Steve could you comment about why Shoghi Effendi was so cuttingly commenting about the passing government in light of how we are to be so neutral about existing governments? It's really true. The Guardian is shockingly frank about those sultans.
Yes. I mean, what can you say? Shoghi Effendi, as the interpreter of the writings, when you build a Baha'i identity, this is my opinion, you have sacred history. Every religion has sacred history. So Shoghi Effendi wrote God Passes By, which is not just historical records, but, God passes by, promised days come. These are all providential history, sacred history. So, I mean, what can you tell about positives about the sultans when they constantly harass the Babis, the Baha'is, and so on the other side, you also see, as I tried to, I'm not in any way trying to contradict Baha'i history, no, but but the Ottomans also provided money, food, and houses for the exiled people. Not only the Baha'is, anyone who was exiled would receive a pension. So this is kind of a, how do you say,
standard procedure.
Yes.
Well, and I think you're quite right about the Guardian really had a shall we say a prerogative that we don't have as mortals.
Yes.
To judge. We probably are not in the position to comment about the character of these people, but Shoghi Effendi had a supernatural access to some information and had the authoritative judgment that we don't have.
Exactly.
So I think that's important to remember. Though it is interesting that I have seen, if someone is a really, really good historian and really well experienced and deeply knowledgeable, they will often express some pretty strong judgments about individuals or history that might surprise people, but then they usually are doing it because they have some capacity from their experience more than the rest of us, because we simply haven't studied the topic as well or the individual as well. So I have seen that in a few cases. I think we actually see it in Lord Curzon in his in the introduction quoted in the beginning of the Dawnbreakers, for example.
Yes.
Though I'm not sure if I should call him a qualified historian, since he was the governor of India or something.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Well, what are you going to cover next time in 2 weeks that's different from this? I'm curious. Maybe give people a little bit of a taste.
In 2 weeks, I think it's also on the website of the Corinth Center.
Yes.
I will deal with how Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha approached Ottoman reform in their writings, actually. And so what does Baha'u'llah say about Abdulaziz, about Ali Pasha, Fuad Pasha? We know all this stuff, but there's also writings of Baha'u'llah unpublished in manuscript form, for example, to Sultan Abdul Hamid, where we have seen this description by Shoghi Effendi and Abdul Baha very harsh about Abdul Hamid. But apparently there was a time before the half-brother of Muhammad Ali instigated, the Ottomans against Abdul Baha. Apparently there was a time in the Akka period before the ascension of Baha'u'llah where Abdul Hamid was not, harassing the Baha'is. So we have tablets of Baha'u'llah actually commending him and even praising him for pursuing reforms in the Ottoman Empire. So I will touch on topics like this, and also about Abdul Baha and his connections to Young Turks.
Very good. That sounds very, very interesting. And then, of course, 3 weeks after that, and I think it's October 13th,
Yes.
You're going to give a presentation about Abdul Baha's Turkish language
Yes.
writings, and that should be quite interesting. And for that matter, you're also going to speak about it, I believe, next week at the Oxford seminar.
Yes, I planned so, but I don't know if I cancel that one. I have too much on my plate. I already wrote to them apologizing, but
that's too bad.
yes,
That's too well.
yes,
That's good. That just means the Corinne True Center gets a scoop.
Yes.
The topic.
Yes.
That would be marvelous. I don't know if we have any other comments or questions. I don't see any.
I don't see any, actually. Probably you're the only one to see those.
Yeah, I don't see any other comments or questions right offhand. This has been quite fascinating, Necati, and I'm really appreciative of this particular topic and this particular presentation, and how it leads to the next two that you're going to be able to give us. We're going to have a really nice series on the Ottomans and on Ottoman Turkish. So that's it today from the Corinne True Center. Yes, we can make the slides available, I assume, on our website. So once those are sent to me, I can put them up, and we'll of course also have the recording up, and we'll have the recording up on SoundCloud as well for those who just want it in podcast form. I want to thank everyone for joining the Corinne True Center for Baha'i Studies today, and we look forward to seeing you for the next two presentations by Necati in 2 weeks, and then 3 weeks after that. And then 2 weeks after that, we will also have Nancy Lee Harper talking about Hand of the Cause of God, Millie Collins, and her life. So we have some very interesting shows coming up in September and October. And of course, we have 2 in November and 2 in December as well. And the plans are continuing to unfold. We're still looking for more presentations. So if people have any proposals, we would be happy to hear from them about them. Or be launching our call for papers again quite soon, so that we get another set of presentations for the spring and summer. So as I said, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again next time. Goodbye for now.
Goodbye. Thank you. Bye.